Hello, everyone. Today, I have to share the story of what I thought was the biggest betrayal of my life. The day everything at the dinner table felt completely normal. The plates were neatly set, the soft clinking of cutlery filled the room, and everyone was busy talking about ordinary things, work, money, future plans. I sat quietly in my chair, simply observing. At family dinners, I had always kept myself in the background, believing that silence was the highest form of respect. I had no idea that this night was about to become one of the most unforgettable nights of my life. Suddenly, my sister-in-law pulled her chair slightly forward. There was something strange about the smile on her face, a smile that never reached her eyes. She looked directly at me as if she had been waiting for this moment. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, but loud enough for everyone to hear, she said, "Know your place." The words hung in the air. For a second, it felt as if time had stopped. No one laughed, no one objected, everyone just watched. Instinctively, I turned to look at my husband. Maybe he would speak. Maybe he would say something. Maybe he would tell her this was wrong. But he stayed silent. His eyes were fixed on his plate as if it were the most important thing in the world at that moment. His silence was louder than any words. In that instant, I realized I was completely alone. I felt anger, pain, and humiliation rising inside me, but I didn't scream, I didn't argue. I refused to lower my dignity to the level of those words. I stayed silent. I slowly picked up my napkin and wiped my hands as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just been publicly humiliated. But inside, something had broken. I stood up. I picked up my bag. I pushed my chair back. Still, no one said a word. No one asked me to stay. No one apologized. Without creating a scene, I walked toward the door. With every step, my heart felt heavier, yet my pace never wavered. When I reached the door, I wrapped my hand around the handle. I paused for a brief second before leaving. Then I took out my phone and dialed a number. At that moment, even I didn't know how much that single call was about to change everything. All I knew was this: no one there would ever forget that night. The moment the door closed behind me, the noise of the house faded, but the weight in my chest did not. The night air felt cold against my skin, yet my face burned, not from embarrassment alone, but from the realization of what had just happened. I stood there for a moment, staring at my phone as the call connected. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I expected them to shake, but they didn't. Something inside me had gone very calm. The person on the other end answered quickly. I didn't explain everything. I didn't need to. I simply said my name and spoke a few short sentences, my voice low and controlled. There was a pause. Then I heard, "I understand." That was all. The call ended. I slipped my phone back into my bag and walked to my car, each step feeling lighter than the last. As I drove away, memories flooded my mind, years of swallowing my words, excusing disrespect, convincing myself that silence would keep the peace. I had told myself that family harmony was worth the discomfort, that enduring small humiliations was part of being mature. But tonight wasn't small. Tonight crossed a line that could never be erased. Inside the house I had left behind, the dinner continued. Plates were cleared, conversation slowly restarted. Someone laughed nervously. My sister-in-law leaned back in her chair, clearly satisfied. To her, it was over. She believed she had put me in my place. My husband avoided everyone's eyes, pretending nothing had happened. No one imagined that anything more would come of it. But change doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it starts quietly, with paperwork being opened, records being checked, and questions being asked. While they finished dessert, something invisible had already begun moving. Decisions that couldn't be undone were already in motion. That night, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I didn't replay the scene again and again. Instead, I slept deeply, more peacefully than I had in months. For the first time in a long while, I felt certain that I had done the right thing, certain that I had chosen myself. By morning, the first message arrived, then another. Missed calls followed. Confusion turned into concern. Concern turned into panic. The tone had changed completely. The same people who had watched in silence now wanted answers. They wanted explanations. They wanted to talk. I didn't respond right away. Because sometimes the strongest response isn't anger or revenge. It's letting people sit with the consequences of what they chose to ignore. And that dinner, the one they thought would end with me quietly disappearing, was only the beginning. By the afternoon, the phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Missed calls stacked on top of each other. Messages kept coming in, some cautious, some confused, some suddenly polite. People who had ignored me the night before were now asking if I was okay, if we could talk, if there had been some kind of misunderstanding. I read them without responding. Silence, I had learned, speaks louder than explanations ever could. Inside that house, panic was settling in. The confidence my sister-in-law had worn so comfortably at the dinner table began to crack. She replayed the moment in her mind, trying to convince herself it meant nothing. It was just a comment, she told herself, just words. But words have weight, and once spoken, they don't disappear, they wait. My husband finally called. When I answered, his voice sounded unfamiliar, uncertain, uneasy. He asked where I was staying. He said we needed to talk. He said things had gotten complicated. That single word told me everything. Nothing was complicated when I was being humiliated. It only became complicated when consequences appeared. I listened quietly as he spoke, explaining without really explaining. He said people were asking questions. He said my call the night before had started something he hadn't expected. I thanked him for letting me know and ended the call. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. Later that day, my sister-in-law reached out. Her message was short and carefully worded. No apology, just confusion, just concern. She wanted to know why things were escalating. I stared at the screen for a long moment before placing my phone face down. For years, I had answered messages like that immediately, eager to smooth things over. This time, I chose stillness. What she didn't understand was that escalation didn't come from my call. It came from her certainty that she could humiliate me without consequence. It came from everyone else's decision to stay silent. The call simply removed the protection they believed they had. That evening, I sat alone by a window watching the sky darken. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only clarity. I had spent too long believing that being quiet meant being weak. I was finally seeing the truth. Silence is only weakness when it's forced. Chosen silence is power. Inside that house, conversations had changed. My name was spoken carefully now, not with judgment, but with caution. They were beginning to understand that some doors, once closed, don't open easily again. And for the first time since that dinner, they were no longer deciding my place. The following day, the truth finally surfaced, quietly but unmistakably. There were meetings I wasn't present in, conversations that stopped the moment I walked into a room, and looks that lingered just a second too long. Whatever my call had set in motion was no longer theoretical, it was real, and it was moving faster than anyone expected. I learned that night had forced people to re-examine things they had ignored for years, patterns of behavior, small acts of disrespect that had been brushed aside as jokes, moments of silence that suddenly looked like approval. What had happened to me wasn't an isolated incident, it was simply the one that could no longer be explained away. My husband came to see me in person. He looked exhausted, not angry, not defensive, just tired. He told me that my call had triggered an internal review, formal, documented, irreversible. He admitted he hadn't understood the seriousness of what had happened until others began asking why no one had spoken up. Questions have a way of stripping away excuses. He apologized, not quickly, not carelessly, slowly, carefully, as if each word mattered now. I listened not because I needed the apology, but because I wanted to hear whether he finally understood. When he finished, I thanked him. That surprised him more than anger ever could. As for my sister-in-law, she never apologized directly. Instead, she changed. Her tone softened, her confidence disappeared. The woman who once smiled while humiliating me now avoided eye contact. She had realized something too late. Power only exists when others allow it. I didn't celebrate her discomfort. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't need to. The shift was already complete. I was no longer the person people spoke over or dismissed. I was the person they measured their words around. What struck me most was how quickly respect returned once boundaries were enforced, not requested, enforced. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone different, not hardened, not bitter, just clear. Clear about what I would accept, clear about what I would never tolerate again. I understood then that dignity doesn't require permission, it requires decision. The dinner that was meant to put me in my place had done the opposite. It had reminded me of where I truly stood. And they never forgot that night, not because of what I said, but because of what I finally chose to do. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to its rhythm, but it wasn't the same rhythm as before. Something had shifted beneath the surface, and everyone could feel it. Conversations were more careful, jokes were filtered. The casual dismissiveness that once passed unnoticed was gone. Not because people had suddenly become kinder, but because they had learned that silence was no longer guaranteed. I noticed it in small ways. Invitations arrived with respect instead of obligation. Opinions were asked for, not ignored. Even disagreements carried a different tone. It wasn't fear, it was awareness. Awareness that I would no longer absorb disrespect just to keep the peace. My husband changed too. He listened more. He spoke up when others crossed lines, and when he didn't, I did. There was no anger in it, just calm certainty. Boundaries, I learned, don't need volume, they need consistency. What stayed with me most wasn't the humiliation at the dinner table, it was the clarity that followed, the realization that waiting for others to defend you is a dangerous habit. People don't always fail you because they're cruel. Sometimes they fail you because silence is easier than courage. That night taught me something I wish I had learned years earlier. Respect is rarely given to those who beg for it. It's given to those who decide they deserve it. I never told anyone what exactly that phone call was about. I didn't need to. The results spoke for themselves. And perhaps that mystery was part of its power. When people don't know your limits, they test them. When they see consequences, they stop. If there's one truth I carry forward, it's this. Walking away isn't weakness. Staying silent isn't surrender. Sometimes the strongest response is choosing yourself and letting the world adjust. That dinner was meant to remind me of my place. Instead, it showed me my worth. And that's why they still talk about that night. What did you think of that twist? Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever faced a betrayal like this? If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of justice, and share this video with a friend. Until next time, stay strong. Don't forget to subscribe.